This presentation is about the struggle to prevent a natural gas power plant from operating in Nicetown, which is in North Philly, slightly northwest Philly. I'm starting out with a couple of photographs of protests. I like this one because I think it's funny. I like the signs, but this is at Maplewood Mall in Germantown. And here's some more pictures here. The puppet with the pink hair represents Mother Nature. She's got a name tag on that says, "Hello, my name is Mother Nature." And the puppet with the big blue head is Father Earth. The people in the white costumes, they're gas busters, like Ghostbusters. And we had a little skit that went along with their costume and the puppets. And the reason why I have the city of Philadelphia, the House of Representatives, the Senate here is because we have met with a lot of politicians and gotten some support, but nobody's passed any legislation to stop this, just written letters. You might recognize Kendra Brooks up in the top left. She is now a councilwoman and lives in Nicetown. So this is something that anybody living in Pennsylvania really needs to know, that we are protected actually by the Constitution. Our environmental rights are protected. Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution says, "The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people." Well, you would never know that by the behavior. So fracking has allies around the state. You can't frack gas without finding someone to buy the gas. So two of the big buyers in Philadelphia are PGW, which distributes gas to anybody with a gas stove or heater, and now SEPTA. So we've been fighting SEPTA. In 2012, SEPTA got into the gas business because they had a plan to convert their diesel buses to compressed natural gas. But they realized it was too expensive, so they changed their mind. But when they went to tell this to Harrisburg, the House of Representatives in Harrisburg, a very powerful Republican representative, Stan Saylor, threatened their funding. And so SEPTA realized that they were going to lose a whole lot of money unless they did something. So they promised that they would build fracked gas burning power plants to run their regional rail lines. So SEPTA subways are already electric and they're run on Pico electricity. But their regional rail, they figured they could hook up to these gas power plants, make their own electricity and run the regional rail. So that's what they promised. Mayor Kenny got behind it. He's been behind it 100% the whole time. And City Council initially in 2016 was very happy about it because the city owns PGW, and that would be money coming in for PGW and therefore the city. So they planned about 6 or 7, I can't remember right now, 6 or 7 different gas plants. But the first one they planned in Nicetown to power the trains that go through Wayne Junction. They have another property next to Wayne Junction called the Midvale Complex, and that's where they have their biggest bus depot. And they have extra land there that they're not using. So they decided to put a gas plant right there and then send the electricity over to Wayne Junction. The question is, why Nicetown for the first one? It's like an experiment. And we feel it's environmental racism. They chose a low income, predominantly Black neighborhood, and they figured they could get away with it with not a whole lot of pushback because people have other problems to deal with and are overwhelmed with many other issues there. But they miscalculated. This is just a picture of our map of power plants that make electricity and feed into the grid, the electric grid, which is regional. And that's where most of our electricity comes from in Philadelphia. So all these little icons are either oil-fired or nuclear power or coal-fired plants or gas, natural gas. There is a very small amount of wind energy and solar. But anyway, most of it's fossil fuel generated. Some of them, as you can see, are right in the city. But anyway, most of our electricity comes from the grid. But the natural gas industry is always looking for customers. So they've been pushing this idea of setting up small little power plants to run various locations, like hospitals have them, universities have them. Now SEPTA has one. And they prefer to push something called a combined heat and power plant, which theoretically can not only produce electricity, but also provide heat for a building, or in the case of one in Grays Ferry, which was called the Veolia plant, but now has another name. I think it's called Victory. They are the ones that make the steam for the city, and they also produce electricity. So they're pushing this as a very efficient way to burn fossil fuels and get a lot out of it. SEPTA's, however, isn't so efficient. These plants should capture 90% of the what's called excess heat waste energy, and SEPTA's will only capture about 5% to heat their bus depot, and they just can't figure out what else to do with it. So it's not that efficient. So when people ask SEPTA, why are you doing this here? What do you need it for? Why don't you just put some solar panels like on all your 5 counties worth of properties? Make your electricity that way. Why are you burning a fossil fuel in the neighborhood? They said, well, the electricity has to be generated on site at Wayne Junction because it's a century-old electrical system, and all of the electricity comes through a central location. Now, for somebody that doesn't really understand things, it sounds good. But then we thought about it and realized that actually they don't have a problem with their electrical supply. According to SEPTA, they only have a power outage from PECO once every other year. And PECO is supplying electricity from other locations. So the whole idea that you need to make it on site just doesn't hold water. Yeah, this is just kind of a synopsis of the situation here.
Do you know that SEPTA wants to build a natural gas power plant in Nicetown? That's right. The plant would burn fracked gas to generate electricity for the regional rail lines, adding more dangerous air pollution to an already burdened neighborhood. Right next to the city's largest bus depot, which is home to over 300 polluting diesel vehicles. In spite of being within a 1-mile radius of several schools, a heavily used park, and 37,000 people who live in this area, and not to mention the 31% of children who have been diagnosed with asthma, SEPTA still thinks this is a good idea. Why would SEPTA refuse to conduct a full health impact analysis? Should they be allowed to compromise our health and well-being? Let's tell Mayor Kenney to deny the SEPTA gas power plant permit. Call him at 215-686-2181 or email him james.kenney@phila.gov.
So just to clarify why this is a problem, like why we're making such a fuss over it. First of all, Nicetown happens to be shaped like a bowl. So when you have a bowl-shaped piece of land and there's pollution, it tends to get trapped in an inversion. And especially in the summertime, it's very uncomfortable. On the right is a map of Philadelphia, and the health department has health maps, and they divide it by zip codes or by districts. And the red arrow is pointing to what's called the North District, and that's where Nicetown is. So keep that in mind because you're going to see some other maps. It's right in the middle of the city. All right, so we're objecting to this polluting plant because of health problems in the neighborhood that are already out of control. You can see that the darkest areas on all of these maps, that's the highest numbers. Those are the highest rates for these diseases. So asthma hospitalization rate for children is second highest in the city. And these are, by the way, from 2014, 2015. These were the statistics that the health department had at their fingertips when they gave the permit for this plant. The cancer mortality rate was top in the city, according to the health department. Frankly, I don't believe that. I think that the refinery area is probably larger, but never mind. This is what they had in front of them. And then cardiovascular disease is third highest. And it's significant that in 2015, they tagged Nicetown as having the highest poverty rate for children and also adults. Now I'm just want to point out something about mental health, emotional health. That's affected by exposure to toxics as well. So mental health, third worst in the city. Adults completing some college, lowest in the city. Homicide rate, highest in the city. Access to parks and outdoor space, I believe it was lowest in the city. So you've got, a vulnerable population to say the least. And I've got the college graduates up in the top corner there just to say what ought to be happening for people in every neighborhood. And when you have exposure to toxics that are destroying children's brains, that's permanent damage. So there's all kinds of environmental factors socially and physically. And that's why we're objecting to adding more pollution. So at this point, they have the permit, they've built the plant. We fought it legally for 3 years. We had to leave that legal battle because of an insufficient attorney, unfortunately. We're still fighting the plant, but we're actually trying to look at how to reduce pollution in the neighborhood in general at this point. And we're kind of looking at what Philly Thrive is doing and saying we need a community benefits agreement as well. So here's a couple things that we think can happen. A sound barrier would trap particulates as vehicles drive by. And that sound barrier belongs on US Route 1, which is elevated and passes right over Nicetown, dropping pollution down on houses and people. And here's a picture of like vertical green. So there's many ways to use green planting to filter air pollution. SEPTA originally had a plan to put a train along Route 1, along Roosevelt Boulevard. That would reduce a lot of that Route 1 car traffic. So we don't know if that's possible, but it's something to start talking about. Also, SEPTA promised to buy or convert to electric buses. They started with 25, they threw out the idea. We want to pressure them to, if they're not going to do electric buses, to maybe go back to the trolley system, which is electric. Also to have the city make it easier for people to own an electric car by providing areas to plug in for people that don't have garages, which is a lot of us in row homes. And then there's some other things that this neighborhood really needs for quality of life, which is a public high school. There isn't one in Nicetown or Germantown, and local employment. That's a whole issue in itself, but there used to be a whole lot of employment in this area, actually on the property that SEPTA now sits on. So the poverty level is partly because those factories, which were polluting, but they closed down and were replaced by other things which are very polluting that aren't employing that many people. So this is just kind of to break through a little bit of propaganda, this last slide, because we've all been affected by things we hear, and it's hard to know what's true. So one of the things that a lot of people have heard is that natural gas is clean energy, and it's not true. Natural gas in your heater, in your stove, is really mostly methane. It's a fossil fuel. When it burns, it does burn cleaner than coal, but it still puts out toxic substances. And that's why if you have an electric heater, you've got a chimney, because if you didn't have a chimney, you would be dead. So the other thing is that when it comes to global warming, and this is a climate justice project, so when it comes to climate justice, you've got to talk about global warming or, the climate change issue. And the natural gas industry is leaking so much methane from the drilling sites to the pipelines, to the compressor stations that push the gas along, to the place where the gas is burned, to the places where it's stored to be exported. Every step of the way, there are gas leaks, including a lot of the pipes sitting under Philadelphia's streets. And that leaking methane is 86 times as potent as carbon dioxide for heating the planet. So another issue with natural gas is that any kind of petroleum or gas that comes up from the ground is going to bring radiation with it. And radiation causes cancer. They wanted to use fracking waste to make salt for roads. Unfortunately, that got defeated. But they'll do anything with it to make a buck. Anyway, that's about it.